If certain areas of the limbic system are stimulated by an electrode, the patient feels an emotion. The limbic system also contains centers important for learning, and through it we perceive the sense of smell. Senses other than smell are primarily perceived in the outermost layer of the cerebrum, the cortex. The cortex is a wrinkled blanket of grey matter, wrinkled so that more of it can fit into the skull. Conscious control of many muscles, language, and reason are all functions of the cortex. Indeed, it is with the cortex that the human brain can think about and explore itself. Like the rest of the cerebrum, it's divided into two major hemispheres. Scientists have learned much about the cortex through the technique of brain surgery, which we saw earlier. By electrically stimulating the brains of thousands of patients, they've been able to create a generalized map of the cortex. Impulses are sent to the brain from the sense organs. In the cortex, they are interpreted as sound, sight, taste, or touch. Through mapping, we have determined that hearing is perceived here. Vision is back here. Taste. Touch. Conscious muscle control. The exact functions of many areas of the brain, called association areas, are less understood. They seem to assemble information into thoughts, plans, and ideas. Surgery, such as we've seen, is performed when only absolutely necessary. For obvious reasons, then, it's difficult to study a living human brain directly. Much of our knowledge has come through the study of the effects of brain damage on our fellow humans. Neurons are among the most delicate of the body's cells. We have more of them in infancy than we will ever have for the rest of our lives. Throughout life, they die and are never replaced. We have so many that are affected by the gradual loss. But when a large area is damaged suddenly, the effect can be catastrophic. Ironically, science can benefit from the tragedy. 1 year ago, at the age of 32, this woman suffered a stroke. The blood supply to part of her brain was blocked by a blood clot. Today, she is partially paralyzed on the right side of her body. The damage occurred in this area where certain muscles are consciously controlled, on the left side of the cortex. It turns out that muscles and the sense of touch on the right side of the body are controlled by the left hemisphere of the cerebrum, and those on the left side of the body are controlled by the right hemisphere. The nerve pathways cross in the brain stem. Nothing is wrong with her muscles. Her brain is simply unable to guide them. If one of the association areas is damaged, the results can be harder to interpret. This man suffered a stroke that damaged an association area on the right side of his brain. He now has a problem called left side neglect. It's as though he forgets that he has a left side, or even that there is such a thing as leftness. His therapist works with him to make him more aware of his left side. She asks him to use both hands to catch the ball. For a short time, he will comply. Some patients with more severe damage to this area will actually deny that they have a left side. They've been known to say that the arm belongs to someone else who's playing a trick on them. In this patient, although the damage is not so severe, his left arm eventually drops to his side, neglected. Because the hemispheres of the brain look symmetrical, one might expect them to function equally. In fact, this is not the case. This man is undergoing therapy to overcome a difficulty caused by a stroke on the left side of his brain. He's confined to a wheelchair and is working to correct a language problem. He can converse quite normally. He has no difficulty understanding other people, and yet he finds it hard to name some things. The brain has two major language areas. They're usually located in the left hemisphere of the cortex. Damage to a part of either of them can result in very specific language problems, such as the one we saw. If the damage had occurred in the same place in the right hemisphere, there would probably be no language difficulty. One of the most remarkable and instructive cases of brain damage began in the autumn of 1848. One day, a man in the United States called Phineas Gage was working with blasting powder in a quarry. Using an iron rod, he tamped the powder down into a hole in the rocky ground. The powder ignited and shot the iron rod straight through his head. The rod entered here, passed through the front of his brain and then out. It seems almost a miracle, but Phineas Gage survived, despite the violent destruction of a large part of his brain. To a stranger, he may even have seemed normal, but to his friends, he was a different man. From being a typical, capable workman, he became obstinate, quick-tempered, and narrow-minded. The damage to his brain changed Phineas Gage's personality for the rest of his life. It turns out that the front of the brain enables us to control our emotions and to plan ahead. Phineas Gage lost these areas. In 1848, brain surgery was impossible, almost inconceivable. Today, it's commonplace. Though many of the brain's abilities elude our comprehension, we take it for granted that we will know it eventually. It is an organ, certainly more delicate and complicated than a kidney or muscle, and more important to us because, in a way, it is us. But it's still an organ. It remains a profound mystery, a single working entity, a concert of electricity and chemistry, a structure that strives to know itself. Every day, the human body receives many different kinds of information. Information from others, information from the environment, and information from the body itself. Much of this information requires a response, a change in the body's action or behavior. Such information is called a stimulus, and it's carried from the senses to the brain by an intricate network of communication and control, the human nervous system. The work of the human nervous system begins here with a neuron or nerve cell, a tiny structure designed to receive and send communication signals, which are called impulses. This is an actual still photograph of neurons sending and receiving impulses. It was produced in a remarkable freezing process developed by Dr. John Heuser of Washington University in St. Louis. Dr. Heuser takes a living neuron sample and places it on a plunger. The neuron is stimulated with an electrical charge which causes it to fire an impulse. At the same instant that the cell fires the impulse, it's slammed against a super cold copper plate that instantly freezes the cell in its moment of action. The neuron is then transferred to a vacuum chamber where it's freeze-dried and its top layer is scraped off. Finally, the neuron is placed in a scanning electron microscope where it's photographed at a magnification of more than 500,000 times. The resulting highly magnified pictures or micrographs reveal more about the neuron than has ever been known before. As the primary structure on which the nervous system is built, the neuron is composed of the cell body and its extensions. The dendrites are thin microscopic extensions found on all sides of the nerve cell. The dendrites carry nerve impulses towards the cell body. The axon, a single thick extension, carries impulses away. The end of each axon lies close to the dendrites of the next neuron, but the cells do not actually touch.